guys, welcome back to my channel, The Inked Reader. Today I am, first of all, filming a bunch of videos and I'm not gonna bother changing because my hair are also still wet from the shower, so they get stick around when I change my shirt. And also, like, you know, there are way more important things than having the same shirt for the next 3 videos, right? But yeah, Happy New Year to you guys. I'm going to do a very brief video now in going through my statistic for 2021, and then in a very few days I'm planning to put on my best books of 2021 and worst books in 2021. But I didn't want to mesh this up with the statistics just in case people would not watch too long video or they were not interested in one thing or the other. So I decided to do a small short video now with the statistic for 2021 and then move on and do other videos separately for the worst and best. I also have to say that although I tried to collect as much statistic as I could last year, in 2022 I've managed to create like a diary format that will allow to get me way more statistics than I did this year. For example, I had collected in 2021 on my monthly one that how many books I've read that were like from the last decade and new releases and so on, but it was just too messy for me to then collect all of them, basically because of the way I've done it. So now in 2022 I've programmed these in a way better way, so at the end of 2022 I will give you more data. Some people love statistics, some people don't, so again, if you're here probably you do like statistics, so be reassured that next year, 2022, I will do better in terms of the data that I can give you at the end of the year. Without further ado, let's see how I've done in 2021. My reading challenge for 2021 was reading 100 books. I have actually read 124 books and 5 graphic novels / manga. Let me address this immediately because I had started 2021 just saying I want to read more manga and graphic novels, and that didn't happen. The reason being that I was still doing my master, working not completely full-time, although it felt like full-time. So my finances were not as good as toward the end of the year, and I couldn't buy many, and I just didn't have time because I was working and studying on top of that. So I didn't end up reading at all basically graphic novel and mangas, which I'm changing in 2022. You can find down below the video where I explain what I'm going to do in 2022 and how I'm about to change this very poor reading of graphic novel and manga. It's a format of digesting content, stories that I absolutely love. So I do want to get back at it as I was in the other years. I was way better and was reading way more. Of the 124 books, 98 were physical, and I really wanted to get to 100 physical books, but I couldn't. When I went to Italy, I just couldn't bring them with me. So yeah, unfortunately, 98 physical books, which include the ebooks. At the end of the day, the difference between paper or just, you know, with your screen scrolling, it's you're still reading, physically actively reading. And although I don't like Kindle, that saved my life, for example, when I was commuting sometimes, or maybe the book was too expensive, so on Kindle was way cheaper, or maybe I was in Italy so I couldn't bring with me physical books, and the Kindle saved my life basically. And then I listened to 26 audiobook. I love Scribd. It's a subscription app you can have definitely in the UK, about the rest of the world, but basically you pay $7.99 a month or something of the sort, and you can get not an infinite number of audiobook, but you can probably listen to around 4 or 5 audiobooks in a month. And then you got infinite ebooks in the sense that if they are in the catalog you can read as many as you want. And so that's nice because when I'm doing chores or sometimes commuting and I don't have a physical book or an ebook, I can always listen. So I listen to 26 audiobook and consume some good stories that way. Now the total number of pages, including audiobooks, that would be, I'm gonna read these because I cannot remember, 46,038. But I also wrote down the statistic of the pages that I have just physically read, so either by physical book or with ebook, without considering the audiobook which I've listened to clearly. So the physical actual read pages were 37,045. My shortest book was 64 pages, and this was We Should All Be Feminists. And the longest one was The Count of Monte Cristo, which I don't remember exactly the page count, but I'm gonna put it here, which was more than 1,000. And I've read 62 books from female authors and 58 books by male authors. Some of those, but very few, were co-written, but probably just a couple. So yeah, I've read actually a majority of books by female authors, but overall it's quite balanced and I like that. My genre that's been most read is fantasy, with 37 fantasy books that I've consumed throughout the year. There is an additional 9 that were sci-fi books. Now, I've actually done a TBR, fantasy TBR, on my channel where I was planning to read each book in a subgenre of fantasy, and I've actually kept tabs throughout the year of the fantasy books that I was reading and what was their subgenre. Now, of course, when you read a book, it hardly just fits in one category. So even if the fantasy subgenre for this year, 2021, I just put it under, you know, the main, or the one I thought it was the main subgenre of fantasy. While in 2022, I plan to put a book, if it has 3 categories of subgenre fantasy that it could go into, I'm planning to tab that for all the 3 categories. So for the fantasy genre though, the subgenre, just if you're curious, what happened is I've read 2 assassin fantasy, 11 comic fantasy, 2 court intrigue fantasies, 1 dark fantasy, 2 erotica fantasy, 1 fable fantasy, 2 low fantasy and 1 hero fantasy, 2 medieval fantasy, 1 military fantasy, 1 paranormal fantasy, as mentioned before, 9 sci-fi, 3 quest fantasy, 2 urban fantasy, 2 romantic fantasy, 1 portal fantasy, and 5 YA fantasy. If you want to know more about these subgenres, what I mean by that, I'll link down below a video I've done basically explaining the subgenre of fantasy, if that's any useful to you at all, or if you're just intrigued by the concept. And again, all these books, like, I don't know, YA books could also fit in other categories of fantasy. I've not recorded them in 2021 in any other category, so just chose one and put them in one, but in 2022 I will put them all over. Like, if a fantasy can fit in 4 categories, it's gonna go in all 4 categories, because I think that's a more fair categorization for that. The other genre that definitely came up as more read was non-fiction, and I read 30 non-fiction. Now, many of those were true crime because of my true crime TBR, but I also read around 1 a month non-fiction in general, or listened to an audiobook. And then I read 4 literary fiction, 4 romance. As you can see, the trend of not reading many romances is continuing on throughout the last 3 years probably. I've read 19 horror books. I discovered my love for horror in around 2020 and I continue on. I've done a horror TBR and a Japanese horror TBR this year. And I read 19 that way, but also 3 over 5 graphic content that I consumed this year was actually horror. I read 3 crime books, audiobooks, and 1 of the 5 graphic content was crime. I've read 3 historical fiction. These are mostly from my book club that I am hosting for my company. I've read 2 classics, 2 contemporaries, plus the last one of the 5 graphic novels, manga that I consumed was actually a contemporary. And I've read 7 thrillers. And finally, stars. So, this year, I actually have interesting results. I gave just 3 books 1 star. And you can wait for the worst of the year to know if you have not followed me throughout the months. I gave 2 stars to 11 books, or in the range of 2 stars. So when I speak about 1 or 2 or 3 or 4, I always mean the range of. So it could go from 4, 25, 0.5, 0.75, okay? So 11 books were in the range of 2 stars, and these stats also include the graphic contents. So 43 books were in the range of 3 stars, and 43 books were in the range of 4 stars, which they balance each other out. I'm not displeased. I would definitely prefer to read more 4 stars and 5 stars than 3 stars or any other, and that just, it's perfectly reasonable for me to say that. But I think for many years I had the majority of 3 stars read, and now they are balancing out with the 4 stars, which means I'm getting actually better myself in reading or choosing books to read that I actually love and that are more tailored to my taste. So it's actually good news. I am getting better, because for many years 3 stars were taking off the 4 star. And also I've read 17 5 stars books, which is amazing considering how stingy I am with my 5 stars. So again, I am getting better at choosing books for myself, which is an amazing, amazing thing to know if you're a reader. The average rating was 3.7, which again, 4 should be better, but it's high compared to other years. It's high. So overall, I had a very good reading year. I'm pleased with it, and I'm really hoping that in 2022, where I am basically doing a TBR based on my shelves, linking down below the video where I explain what I'm doing, these averages and these statistics will even get better. Thank you for watching, guys. Let me know what are your stats for 2021, at least how many books you've managed to read in the year. It's always fun to know, and I'll see you next time. Take care of yourself. Ciao.